I am Phoenix, Director of Tribes, and I want to talk about the power of prayer. I had a divine appointment this past weekend. It was really impactful to me and another guy, and I just feel like I need to share this with everybody because, you know, as Christians, at some point or another, we're all going to question prayer. And is what I'm saying being heard by God? Are my prayers making any difference? And a lot of times we don't see God answering prayers. Um, but this case, it happened instantly, and it was amazing to me. So Saturday night, I was on the way to run a 50K, a nighttime 50K. And I've run a bunch of 50Ks before, but I didn't really prepare for this one. I didn't train like I should have. And I knew that going into this. On the way to the 50K, a tribesman had reached out to me and wanted to talk about prayer and spiritual warfare. And I was driving through the mountains, had really terrible cell reception, so it was hard to line up a call. And it was torrential downpour too. So the one or two times I had cell reception, it was so loud, we just couldn't make the call. So I said, hey, how about I just call you when I get out on the trail? I'll probably need to talk to somebody anyway. And so get there, start the race. And sure enough, about 8 or 9 miles in, I'm feeling terrible. Body starts breaking down. Everything in my mind was saying, stop. Um, and I got to probably the halfway point, and I was just about back of the pack. There wasn't a whole lot of people behind me, and I started feeling bad about it. So that's when I called the tribesman back, and we had a great conversation about prayer and just how we need to be praying out loud for our fellow tribesmen more than we do, praying out loud with our family more than we do. And so it was a great conversation, lifted me up. And before we got off the phone, we prayed out loud for each other. And his prayer to me was that God would put somebody in my path, specifically at an aid station, he said, and that I would be able to boldly share God with this person. So we get off the phone, and no more than 10 minutes later, I get to the next aid station. And there's this guy there. He was wearing these pretty cool American flag shorts. And he was talking to the volunteers at the aid station. And he made some comment about growing up in Catholic school. And it was clearly a negative experience for him. Well, I wasn't really thinking about it at the time. I was just thinking about not dying. So I grabbed the food and the water that I needed and left the aid station. And just a few minutes later, it kind of dawned on me, I was just prayed for to meet a guy and share God with him. Maybe that was the guy. Well, to be perfectly honest, I didn't have a whole lot left in the tank, physically, spiritually, mentally, and I did not want to have that conversation, especially this guy. I'd passed him a couple of times. We'd passed each other a couple of times, and he had a bit of a mouth on him, and sometimes an attitude. So I was like, I can't do this right now. So again, there's only a few people left in the race. I knew what his headlamp looked like. This is probably 11:30 p.m. at night, so it was dark, couldn't see a whole lot, but I knew what his headlamp looked like. And after I started having those thoughts, like maybe that's my guy, I looked back, and sure enough, he's right behind me. And at that point, that was my motivation to run faster, to get away from this guy, because I just didn't want to have that conversation. And then I started to feel a little bit bad about it. So I slowed down, and at one point he passes me, and made a little comment, and he made a comment, but then he just kept on going, kept on trucking, and he got so far ahead of me that I couldn't see him anymore. And I kind of felt a little bit of relief at first, like, okay, I don't have to spend any more energy than I have right now. But again, still felt like God was saying, that was the guy. That was the person that I want you to talk to. 5 minutes later, I see a headlamp coming right at me. And I didn't even know what it was at first. I'm like, why is there somebody running this direction? There's no way this is somebody involved in this race. That was a flat rails to trail race where it's literally impossible to get lost. The race director said it's impossible to get lost on this trail. It's an out and back. And there was nobody hardly behind me. Sure enough, this person comes right up to me, and it's the shorts guy. And the first thing he says to me is, am I going the wrong direction? And I said, yeah, man, you're going the wrong direction. And he said, the weirdest thing just happened. I was going along, and I sneezed, and I got disoriented, and I guess I started running the wrong direction. And in my head, I'm like, that there's no way. There's no way that just happens, where somebody sneezes and gets so disoriented that they run the opposite direction. So rather than the guy just saying, thanks, man, see you at the finish line, he just decided to stick with me. So at that point, I knew there was no avoiding this conversation. God placed this person right in my path. There was no avoiding it. And so I was like, okay, here we go. We're going to have this conversation. And pretty early on in the conversation, I brought up his comment about Catholic school. And I said, are you still, involved in, a Catholic church? And he said, absolutely not. I want nothing to do with that. And I said, is it because of Catholic school? And he said, yeah, absolutely. Just, religion. I want nothing to do with it. There's too many controls, too many rituals, and it doesn't align with what I want to do in life. So that opened up the doors for what ended up being a phenomenal spiritual conversation, where I was able to share a lot of my own experience and testimony with this guy, and come alongside him and try to drop some pebbles in his shoe. So, it wasn't like he was led to Christ and gave his life over during that time, but we had about 13, 14 miles on the trail, 2.5 hours worth of time. And a lot of that time was spent talking about God. And it just blew my mind how this tribesman prayed that very specific prayer with me out loud, and then it unfolded right before my eyes. So the lesson here to me is there is power in prayer. Our prayers are being heard, especially when they line up with the will of God. So I challenge each of you to pray out loud with your brothers, pray out loud with your family, and don't just say, I'll pray for you. If you're going to say, I'll pray for you, pray for them right then and there. Don't wait. And you will be amazed at what God does with a heart of prayer.